And welcome back, Mindsetters. I hope you had a nice little break. You went and did whatever you had to do. You went to the bathroom. You went to answer the phone. Now you need to pay attention and have your pens and pads out and ready to make notes. Because I'm going to hand over to Claire, who's going to continue the show. Claire, take it away.
Cool, thanks, Tara. Right, so in the break, I said to you that you needed to now work out how many tiles would fit into the width of the floor. So running through that pretty quickly then. Right, so 5 meters, that was our length of our, that was the length of our width, okay, or the width of the floor, better English. And we're going to divide that by 0.4. All right, so on your calculators, if you put that on your calculator, you should have got, all right, an answer of 12.5, right? So once again, you need to think to yourself, 12.5 tiles. If the tile is buying the box, he's not necessarily going to buy 12.5 tiles. He's going to buy a box that's going to have a complete number. So in this case, we're going to then round up to 13 tiles. Okay, right. So what have we calculated? So we know that there's 18 tiles that are going to fit into the length of our floor. We've now worked out that there are 13 tiles that will fit into the width. Okay, so 13 of those tiles going in that direction. Okay, and 18 in that direction. So we know now to work out how many tiles in total, if there's 18 rows, okay, and there's 13 columns, if you like, 18 multiplied by 13 is then going to tell us how many tiles we have in total. Right, so 18 multiplied by 13. Okay. Grab your calculators. Right, 18 multiplied by 13 gives us an answer of 234 tiles. Make sure you tell the marker or the person who's going to be looking at your paper that we're dealing with, you understand that we're dealing with number of tiles. So just put that in there so that you can explain quite clearly that you know what you're talking about. All right. Now, we need to quickly talk about the difference in our questions, because when we worked with the area of the floor and we worked with the area of the tile, we worked out that we only needed 194 tiles. Okay. However, in this other method, we've calculated that we need 234 tiles. So if we look at the picture, right? Now I know some of you are shouting at me and saying, oh yeah, but that's because we included that little extra rectangle, so obviously there will be more tiles. Okay, but that's what we're going to do then is let's work out how many tiles would cover that area. Okay, we'll take that away, and we'll see then maybe they'll end up being the same as the previous answer, maybe not. Okay, so exactly the same way as what we did with the 7 and the 5, we're going to work with the 1.55 and the 2.65 meters. And I just want to work out how many tiles would cover that area over there. And we're going to get rid of those because we obviously don't need those because that's not actually part of the floor area. All right. So I'm going to do it over here, right next to the question so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So we said already 1,55. If we divide that by 0.4, okay, and we get our answer. And we're going to do the same thing with the 2,65 divided by 0.4. And that'll tell us how many tiles, right? So we're trying to work out how many of the tiles will fit into that length over there and how many tiles will fit into the width. So grabbing your calculators, 1.55 divided by 0.4. All right? That tells us that we're looking at 3.875 tiles. Okay, using your common sense, you can't have 0.875 of a tile, so we're going to round up to the nearest whole number. So we're working with 4 tiles in that situation. If we get the other calculation, we said it was 2.65 divided by 0.4, right? And in that situation, you look at 6.625, which we're going to then round up to 7, all right? So this answer, when we rounded it up, was going to give us an answer of 4 tiles. And this gave us an answer of 7 tiles. Okay, so 7 tiles across the length, 4 tiles across the width. 7 multiplied by 4 is going to give us 28 tiles. Okay, so in that little block over there, all right, there's 28 tiles that I now don't need. So in this calculation that I worked out down the bottom, okay, which gave me my 234 tiles for the entire floor, 28 of those I don't need those anymore, not part of the floor area, so we're going to take that away. So 234 minus 28 tiles. Okay, so grab your calculators. Right, 234 minus 28. Okay, gives us 206 tiles. All right, now let's talk. So, using the tilers method, we got 206 tiles. Using the previous method, we got 194 tiles. Okay, so now we need to ask ourselves the question is, why is there such a big difference between the two? Okay, so think about it. Okay, so what we did with the first one is it was almost like a theoretical method. We're saying if we cut up the tiles and we kind of made sure that all of our little gaps were covered using the extra tiles, then we've got a minimum of 194 tiles that we're going to need. Okay, but in terms of actually doing the building, okay, tilers don't really want to kind of cut up pieces of tiles. They're going to try and keep it as clean and as neat as possible. In other words, they're going to use whole tiles for as long as possible. And then if they get to, let's say, the edge of the floor and there's a tiny little gap where a whole tile won't fit in, well, then they're going to look at the extra tiles that they've got and then they're going to cut them and place them accordingly. Okay, but we don't really want kind of half a tile here, a quarter of a tile here, a third of a tile here. We want to try and keep it with the least amount of breaks and the least amount of kind of bitty areas as possible. Okay? So the difference between these two methods is the first one is simply saying if we do cut up all the little bits and pieces and we mishmatch them, in other words, we kind of do a little bit of a puzzle and stick them in the little areas, well, then you only need 194 tiles. The tile, on the other hand, is saying to be on the safe side, let's get 206. In that case, we don't have to worry about cutting and recutting. We only need to, let's say, make one cut per tile in order to make sure that we fill up all the gaps. Okay, so just something to think about. All right. We're going to have a look at another question in a minute that's very similar to this, except it looks at volume. Okay, so keep this kind of method in the back of your mind so that when we get to that question, you can then use the same logic in order to get to the correct answer. Okay. All right, something, now that was quite hardcore, that was quite hectic for the brain, so let's go for something a little bit light-hearted. All right. The next question that we're going to have a look at, this is something that's been introduced into your new system, your new department system. In other words, they're looking at maths is not just about crunching numbers, all right? So maths literacy is about reading instructions. It's about giving instructions, clear instructions to somebody. So you are not only involved with the numerical side, in other words, the math part, but you need to be literate as well. Okay, so maths literacy, combining the two together. So the next question that we're going to have a look at, okay, really cool little diagram, kind of takes me back to my childhood days with these little Lego men. All right, so it says that in question 2, some toys give instructions using drawings. Write down the steps to build this toy figure. Okay, so let's first just have a look at the actual drawing itself, and then from there we're then going to have to write down instructions on how we're going to put this Lego man together. Okay, so nice and straightforward. They've shown us the arrows on your picture. Okay, so looking at the arrows, they're kind of indicating to you where we're going to start. All right, so starting at the hat, moving on to the head, moving on to the body or the torso, and then into the leg area. Okay, so now when you're writing down steps for something like this, obviously this is a nice basic example. They could give you something a little bit more complicated. All right, think about it as if you're explaining to your 5-year-old brother, okay, or your 6-year-old sister. In other words, you need to be very, very clear about what goes on to what goes on to what. So kind of like a foolproof method in order to put this thing together. So the more detail you give, that's fine. The more detail you give is better, because then there's no kind of questions as to say, well, what exactly did they mean by that? Okay, give clear instructions when you're writing down your steps. All right, so step number 1. Starting at the hat, because that's obviously the direction that we're working from. So starting from the hat, moving into the head, moving into the body, and then moving into the legs. So step number 1. Okay, so step number 1 for me, I would explain that we need to place the hat Okay, on the head. Okay, nice and straightforward. Step number 2. So once we've got the hats on the head, we're then going to put the head on the body. All right, so place the head. Okay, on the body. Okay, if you want to write down torso, that'll really impress your English teachers. Okay, torso meaning this part of your body, not your legs. All right. And then the last part is obviously in placing the torso, which now has the head and the hat on top of it, and we're going to place that on top of the legs. Okay, so place the body on the legs. Okay, so just summarizing that kind of a question. First thing you need to do is obviously look at the diagram itself. Okay, so you're making sure that you can see if there's any arrows or any special instructions already on the sketch. You're following those instructions in order to write down your steps for the assembly. Okay, cool, nice and straightforward. Right, okay, next question, a little bit more challenging. Keep in mind what we've done so far. Okay, so the ideas that we've done so far. Let's have a look at the next question. All right. Question 3 says, Jabu has to pack cylindrical cans into boxes. Okay, so cylindrical cans into boxes. The cans have a diameter of 8 centimeters and a height of 11 centimeters. And the boxes measure 66 centimeters by 33 centimeters by 13 centimeters. Quite a bit of information given in that question. So make sure that you've got your highlighter and you've got your ruler or whatever, and you're highlighting the keywords in the question so you can focus on what's important. So quite nice then, they've given us a little diagram to see what are we actually talking about. So we've got the dimensions of the box, so 66 centimeters by 33 centimeters. And we've got our cylindrical cans, obviously, that are now going to be packed within the box. Okay, so question 1, or question A, says, how many cans can be packed into a box using the arrangement above? Now, I've kind of brought a can along today so you can get an idea of what we're actually talking about. So there's obviously different ways you can pack something into a box. So in most cases, most cans will be packed on their circular bases, because if we tip it to one side, we don't want anything to fall out, right? But we could if we wanted to. So we can either pack it, so if it's standing on our cylindrical base, or we can turn it and we can lie them down and pack them in that direction. So we need to obviously look at both different ways of packing the cans into the box, and then decide, well, which one's going to allow us to pack more cans into the box. Right. So the first way we're going to have a look at is if it is actually standing on the cylindrical base. Okay. So in this case, again, imagining that they're basically packed next to each other, okay, along like that, packed behind each other, and if necessary, they could even be packed on top of each other. All right. Okay. So when we did our tiling question, we started off by saying, all right, I need to figure out how many of these things will fit into the length and how many of them will fit into the breadth. And then lastly, because now we're looking at a 3-dimensional shape, how many will fit on top of each other. So taking the dimensions of your cylinder, taking the dimensions of the box, I want us to find out how many of these diameters will fit into the length of my box. So 66 centimeters. Right, so 66 centimeters. If we look at the diameter, okay, they've specifically told us that the diameter in this case is 8 centimeters. All right, so we want to know how many 8 centimeters are going to fit into my 66. So 66 divided by 8, okay. Right, okay, now we need to ask ourselves a question, because in the last question that we did, we had to make a decision about whether we need to round up or we need to round down. Okay, so because in the last question we were wondering how many tiles we need, we obviously try and buy more in order to make sure that we have enough to cover the floor area. Now in this question, it's asking you how many cans are going to fit into the box. So if the answer comes out to be 8.25 cans, it's saying that that last can, okay, the 9th can, if you want to put it that way, it's not going to fit. So in this situation, instead of rounding up to the nearest whole number, the context is telling us that we're not going to be able to fit that many cans into the length of the box, so we need to be rounding it down. So 8 full cans will fit, and then obviously we'll just have a slight bit of space left over. So in this situation, we're going to work with 8 cans. Okay. Right, so that's saying that 8 of those, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, so 8 of those will be fitting into the length. Quickly work out on your calculator how many are going to fit into my breadth. So once again, you were still working with the diameter. Okay, so we're still working with the 8 centimeters because remember, when you're working with diameter, it doesn't matter whether I turn the can to the front or to the back, it's still going to be 8 centimeters in width, if you want to put it that way. So the diameter is still going to be 8 centimeters. So on your calculators, 33 centimeters divided by 8. So how many cans are going to fit widthwise? So 33 centimeters divided by 8. Okay, 4.125. So thinking about that, 4.125, it's saying that 4 will definitely fit, but that 5th can isn't going to fit. Doesn't matter how much you squeeze and you kick and you push, it's still not going to be able to put inside that box. So in this case, we're working with 4 cans. All right. So what have we worked out? We've worked that we can have 8 across in the length. We're now going to have 4 within the width, all right, so 8 by 4, and then obviously we'd fill this up, okay, I'm not going to draw them all in, but you get the idea that we'll have 4 rows with 8 cans in each row. Now, that's all very well if we were dealing with area, but in this case, we're dealing with volume. So now you need to think about a third dimension, and you think to yourself, well, how deep is my box? Am I going to be able to fit another can on top of, in other words, put 2 cans on top of each other? Is there just enough space in order to put 1 can in? Okay. So in that situation, you need to be looking at the height of your cylinder. So just drawing a quick sketch, we know that that distance over there is obviously going to be 8 centimeters. Okay. And the height of this can is 11 centimeters because they told us that's in the question. Right. The height of the box is 13 centimeters. So I shouldn't have to do a calculation. Visualizing, if the box is 13 centimeters deep and the can is 11 centimeters deep, there's no way I'm going to be able to put 2 cans on top of each other because they're going to stick out the box. All right? So in this situation, we're just going to have 1 layer of cans within this box. All right? So, okay, I'm going to jump down to the bottom. So we said 8 cans across the length, 4 cans across the breadth, and 1 layer deep, which means that the number of cans that we're working with, okay, so number of cans is going to be 8 by 4 by 1. All right? And on your calculators, or if you just know your times tables, 8 multiplied by 4 gives us 32, and 32 multiplied by 1 is going to give us 32 cans. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. Okay, so quickly go grab yourself something to drink. Ta.
All right. As she said, which is technically what I'm supposed to say, well, Claire, you're trying to take my job too. I know you're here to teach, but come on. But anyway, mindset is, as I said, make sure that you guys come back always, always, always. Go do whatever you have to do. If you have to go put your bags away, if you have to go change out a uniform, whatever, make it snappy, because we'll be right back after this break.